So welcome everybody to this webinar on political wisdom and future of Christian democratic parties. My name is Tapio Luomaho. I'm the director of Kompassi think tank from Finland, and we have today visitors from we have participants in this webinar from at least from Netherlands, Finland, and United Kingdom. So welcome to everybody. There is a saying from the 1960s, just like this. Everybody knows that Jesus rode a donkey to Jerusalem. But today, some donkeys are trying to ride with Jesus into politics. Back in the days, not all church leaders in Finland were so supportive of the founding of an explicitly Christian party in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The Christian coalition, Suomen Kristillinen Liitto, which is today the Christian Democrats in Finland, was now founded in 1958 to counteract the trends of secularization of the Finnish society. The Christian coalition was accused, for example, of sort of hijacking the Christian agenda. What makes you think you are more Christian than the other parties, such as the Social Democrats or the Center Coalition or the Agriculture Party? Some Lutheran leaders saw a Christian party very problematic from point of view of the doctrine of two kingdoms or the two regiments. That's very key in Martin Luther's theology. Back in the days, there were still many Christians, including pastors in many other parties. And also back in those days, the Pentecostal leaders warned of participating into politics altogether. So it was a different world. Finland, Finnish culture and mainstream Finnish parties have indeed changed a lot over the decades. Almost all the parties of the mid-20th century would seem very Christian or conservative from today's perspective. Secularization or walking away from some kind of Christian worldview has advanced much further from those days. And actually, Christian democratic parties struggle everywhere in Europe, at least in many countries. And in some countries, there is no longer a Christian democratic party. But what does it mean in 21st century to be a Christian party? Is there still a need for some explicitly Christian political parties? Why are they needed? What are the pros and what are the cons? And what is actually in the heart of Christian democracy? These type of questions are asked by many people, and today we will ask them from somebody who has really put effort in putting together some answers. Rob Nijhoff, excuse me, Rob Nijhoff?
Yeah, Nijhoff.
Has been a researcher for the Scientific Institute of the ChristenUnie in the Netherlands. ChristenUnie is a party, and you will maybe hopefully tell a little bit more about it soon. He has studied information sciences and theology, and at this moment, to my understanding, you are working as a pastor serving a Protestant congregation near Arnhem in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And you're also lecturing in philosophy of religion at the Evangelical Theological Faculty in Leuven, Belgium.
Yeah.
Yes. In addition, we are joined by Johannes de Jong, who is director of Sallux think tank from Netherlands, as well as Matthew Williams from UK, who has written on relational thinking and many other topics for Sallux and the Jubilee Center think tank in UK. So, welcome, Rob. It's such a privilege to have you online.
Yeah.
And now today we will kind of conduct this webinar as a kind of an interview with Rob, and also Johannes and Matthew will join us with comments. Maybe I will just ask first a few questions on your background and also about the part you have been involved with. You worked 10 years in the think tank of the party. Maybe you could say something about the party scene in the Netherlands. I heard there's actually more than one sort of Christian or Christian democratic parties in the Netherlands. So what's the history and what's the political landscape there? Maybe you could start with that.
Yeah, I think it's good to be sensitive to the historical context and the differences between the different countries. So what is specific for the Netherlands is what happened at the end of the 19th century. We had this Abraham Kuyper. Abraham Kuyper started as a pastor. But he is the founder of the Vrije Universiteit, the Free University of Amsterdam. He founded several journals in order to mobilize the more Calvinist Christian people within the Netherlands, and he tried to get them active in politics, and he succeeded. In 1901. He became prime minister by having a coalition together with the Roman Catholics. So this background of the Netherlands, and I have this book, I hope it is visible, Abraham Kuyper. The biography is written by an American, James Bratt. And worldwide, not in the Netherlands itself, but especially worldwide, there is a lot of interest in Abraham Kuyper because he is helping Christians to come out of a kind of, well, pietist approach, maybe I should say. An approach, maybe it can be triggered by that Lutheran two-kingdom doctrine. If you consider politics to be dirty only, then you have then you are inclined to withdraw yourself from that. And that's what Abraham Kuyper started to reverse. No, be involved in politics. Well, to make a jump to the 70s, Roman Catholic parties, a Roman Catholic party, and the political party that was founded by Abraham Kuyper himself, they joined together with another party, but never mind, and that became in the Netherlands the Christian Democrats. So the Christian Democrat Party has from the 70s been one of the biggest parties of the Netherlands politics until 10 years ago, more or less. And alongside this Christian Democrat Party, we have two smaller Christian parties. One is related to the more, what I said, the more pietist Christians in the Netherlands. Nevertheless, it is a Calvinist party, staatkundig gereformeerde partij, political reformed party. It's quite explicitly Christian. But if you want to use these labels left or right wing, then they are more at the right wing. Critical about immigration, for example. Conservative in several ways. Stressing limited government, almost in a neoliberal way. So that's one of the smaller Christian parties, and the other smaller Christian party is the ChristenUnie, the Christian Union. That's the party that I worked for 10 years. If you want, you can say it is more at the left side of the political spectrum, but not because it is distancing itself from that limited government. The point is, it combines a limited government with a responsible government. So not only a procedural or a formal view of government. And when you are looking at the substance of the political positions, then it's not just advocating typical Christian issues, like being pro-life or trying to limit tendencies toward euthanasia, for example. But it is explicitly Christian in its view about immigration and about economics and how to organize economical life in such a way that minorities, the lower social strata of society, will profit from the national economics as well. Now, that's in a nutshell, I would say, the three Christian political parties: the Christian Democrats and the two smaller Christian parties.
If I could ask a little bit more in detail, how would you say the Christian Democratic Party or parties, what are the most important differences to, let's say, the mainstream parties? I don't remember which party is Mark Rutte representing, for example, but what?
Yeah, that's the Liberal Party. Yeah.
Yeah. What is kind of the heart of the difference? What's the most important difference to them, for example?
Yeah. I don't think any of the Christian parties would identify itself with the Liberal Party of Mark Rutte. Only the Christian Democrats, so the biggest one, has moved for the last 30 years close to the liberal views. Even now in issues of immigration, for example. So that they try to limit immigration stronger than they used to do. Well, that same more liberal inclination I said about the political Reformed Party, that more pietist political Christian party. But the Christian Union is most opposed towards this liberal line. Yeah.
Quite interesting. I think that would be a very big question, and I would be glad if there was any more specific comments, even in from the audience. I mean, you can write in the chat if you want to ask on some specifics. But let's move on a little bit, because we have quite a few things, and this background is very big, and of course the political landscape is very different in all our countries. We have some participants here also from Sweden. From a Swedish political think tank. So I mean, later we'd be glad to hear some comments from there too. Okay. I would then I still have some one question on the Dutch parties and Dutch political spectrum, like talking of the Christian Democrats in ChristenUnie. What is the relationship to the larger Christian democratic movement in Europe, like for example to the EPP in Europe Parliament or the German CDU? I thought maybe that's quite interesting to some. Of course, that's been like, for example, a big question in Finland too. The Finnish Christian Democrats actually joined the EPP just like 4 or 5 years ago. So something new. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe that Johannes can give you more information about those European relationships.
I'm happy to. Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Tapio. So do you hear me properly? Am I understandable? Good.
Yes, very good.
I can be rather short on this. So so there's two layers here. One is the point you just referred to, Tapio, that is the layer of the European political party, that is EPP. And then there is the group in the European Parliament, the European People's Party group in the European Parliament. And these are two different things. And it's important to make that point here to clarify the relationship. So what is a European political party? Very quickly, is basically a coming together of national parties. And a group in the European Parliament is basically a number of members of European Parliament, MEPs, sitting together in one group in the European Parliament. It's limited to the European Parliament itself. So why is this relevant? For example, the Dutch ChristenUnie is a member party of the European Christian political movement. So is the SGP. But they are each their members of European Parliament are each in a different group. So the MEP of the Dutch Christian Union is in the EPP group in the European Parliament, and the MEP of the SGP is in the ECR, European Conservatives and Reformist group in the European Parliament. So that clarifies that. While they're both member of the European Christian political movement, and it shows a little bit of this divergence. You have the same Christian basis, but you translate it differently. At the same time, for example, for the ChristenUnie, I think they have, and both the SGP and the ChristenUnie have the same problem in that sense, that there is no group in the European Parliament that fully would represent their values, in the sense that, for example, the EPP group is, when it comes to economic issues or climate issues, much more conservative, much more oriented to status quo than, for example, the ChristenUnie itself is. But you cannot have the perfect group in the European Parliament in that sense. Now, there's a difference with the Dutch CDA, CDA. That is a full member of the European People's Party as a political party, as well as their MEPs are in the European People's Party group. But they are also more, in difference to the Dutch ChristenUnie, they are more, they are much more part of the status quo economically and socially, and also in terms of issues like climate change. And so they fit there actually logically, also ideologically, in terms of political stances, much better. So I think that explains that. And I would like to leave it there, because then I don't take too much time, because I would like to come back to some of this later on.
Thank you. Okay, actually, you made this point already to the Europolitics, but maybe for most of us, we are not very well aware of what's all the details of the European politics. So I would like to ask Rob or Johannes, you can also comment on the history of the Christian democratic movements in Europe, because it seems to me that, or actually it is historical, that the Christian democratic parties have become like a mainstream parties in several countries, or some countries like in Germany. Of course, some people see it, they're kind of have lost their salt. Or in Italy, there is no longer a Christian Democratic Party. They have actually gone totally bust already in the 80s. And in some other nations, the Christian Democratic parties are a little bit struggling. Like in Finland, we have the same 3 or 3.5% vote. And not going up, not going much down. And in Norway and Denmark, it's also been quite challenging last year. So why has this happened? Why have the Christian Democratic parties lost their kind of appeal to the voters?
You asking me, I guess.
Yes, of course, yes, but
yeah,
of course, Johannes or Matthew, you're free to comment also.
Yeah. The main reason of the decline, I would say, is of course the more general secularization. However, the way to react is important as well. What we have seen in the Netherlands, in any case, is that the Christian Democrats for a long time have been able to join, let's say, the power, so to remain mainstream. So only from the 90s, at the end of the 20th century, then there came a coalition started with liberals and social democrats together, without the Christian Democrats. That was for the first time in the Netherlands, after Abraham Kuyper. So that was really the start of a move down of the Christian Democrats, I would say. So what I see as a cause of this move downward is not only the secularization, but as well that lost salt problem by being too long in the arena of the power, and having not made clear enough what is the specifically Christian background of certain political lines, of political decisions, of political proposals.
Yeah, everybody has a worldview, as you say very well in your book, and that's something we could be talking more about. This is actually a very big question, and we'd be very glad to hear also if comments from the other countries, if you have some points on this now or later. So just feel free to join. Just for your information, this event is being recorded, so if you are shy on that, then you might take it into consideration with your comments. But anyways, I would still ask this from another perspective, like as we have seen, the Christian Democratic parties have been in power in many European countries after the World War II, and they have been sort of a uniting force in the political spectrum, at least in some countries. And this is totally something that we don't realize in Finland. The Finnish Christian Democrats, we feel that we have always been a small party, and we have maximum 10 MPs, and so we don't have this history. We are always been kind of a challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We have been challenging the others. So maybe my question would be like, if you can imagine what would Europe look like today without the Christian Democratic parties? Well, is there something, where would Europe be today if there had not been this Christian Democratic movement after the Second World War?
Well, I can give a very quick answer to that one. And it is highly likely that the EU wouldn't exist, because I mean the EU was founded by Christian Democrats. So I can give a very simple and clear answer to that one. And it would be very interesting to see if basically this whole life approach that is inherent to Christian democracy would have been, if that would not have been the perspective basically of the leading politicians of that time, the question there would have been a very open question whether there would have been an EU at all. So that is a very interesting question, and you cannot repeat history, and so but that would be my first answer. But I would like to come back to the point that Rob rightly made with regard to the Dutch CDA, I think basically if you see all over Europe, and I'm not talking about specific Finland case because it's a bit of an specific situation, I think. But the point is that if you look to the big Christian Democrat parties where you refer to in your question, Tapio, I would say that the biggest problem is a very simple one, and that is that they completely, it's not the fact that they were in power. It's the problem is that they became servants of vested interest and the status quo, and representatives of the vested interest and status quo of big interests, big power, and also of the interest of one generation only. And that generation is now retiring, partly also leaving us in general because of demographic change. And the problem that then is that if you basically constantly only represent vested interest and status quo, at a certain point that vested interest and status quo loses its, basically its roots in society. And the problem that you then have is that you basically represent something that is already gone, and then there's no appeal in voting, for parties that basically represent the past, and not simply the past in terms of Christianity, but also the past in terms of economics and social strata in society. And there I think Christian Democrats need to make a big change. But I'd leave it there because then I'll come back to point after question 7.
Yeah. I would like to add that I'm certainly positive about the contribution of the contribution of the Christian Democrats in Europe, but in the different countries as well, because it has made clear for everyone interested somehow in politics and what's going on that there is a third way, not starting top down from the government, like the Social Democrats usually advocate, and at the other side, not starting only from the individual. And that's the emphasis that is advocated by the liberals. So the Christian Democrats have a combination of, I would say, of a bottom-up view of society, but there is more in the bottom of the society than only individuals. There are associations of all different kinds. There is no isolated individual. All individuals start growing up in families, maybe broken families, but they start growing up in families. And they, when they grow up, they meet their other associations, other groups of people in which they are formed. For example, the schools, and maybe in churches, but as well in sporting clubs, for example. So all those groups in societies and companies, firms, that's another group, other type of groups in society. All those groups together are forming the web of society. And the web of society is important to be cared for. So there is a responsibility at the side of the government to care not only for the freedom of individuals, like the liberals would agree, but also to care for the web of society. And that's, I would say, the positive contribution of the Christian Democrats.
That's a very interesting point of view, and it's very much linked to the kind of the criticism of liberalism as a political philosophy that has been rising lately. Lately, it reminds me of, like, for example, Patrick Dinin's criticism of liberalism, and how he sees actually this kind of statist idea and or left, let's say left, and the right, individualism of the right, actually kind of two streams of the same liberalism, actually, that kind of has the value of the individual as the highest good, but they're just two different ways of kind of fulfilling that age-old dream of freedom. And then the root question is actually, what is freedom? What really is freedom? Is it just the individual by himself or herself, or is it something deeper? And that's kind of actually a very interesting philosophical question.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we have time for that right now, but let's let's move on. I will share one more. Actually, this discussion is based on this book by Rob, and I will share a quote from the book. Let's see if we can have it here on the screen. Yes. Many Dutch people of an older generation have negative connotation with church or Christianity. Younger generations, there is a growing number to whom Christianity doesn't say much emotionally. They simply do not know much about it. Christians themselves no longer see it as self-evident to vote for a Christian political party, let alone to engage in a long-term commitment to one specific political party. Old patterns of segregation fade. So my question, this actually reminds me of a US writer, journalist, researcher, or Adam Wren, who wrote an analysis that from the perspective of church or anything that's kind of Christian, we live today in a kind of a negative world, but so that, you know, if something is Christian, it is kind of a negative thing. So what does this mean for Christian democratic parties? Is this a challenge or also maybe an opportunity?
Yeah, I've at least two reactions. I was glad with your link to the to this analysis of Aaron Wren, because I hadn't read that article before, and my first reaction is that it's completely recognizable. The quote in Political Wisdom and what he describes in what's going on in America, that is very much parallel. But what I want to stress is that when people are in the grip of a negative view of Christianity, that is historically not true. So, of course, you can be negative about the Trump government and the Christians that are trying to use Trump as a kind of donkey, indeed, to have their ideals fulfilled somehow. The judges in the highest court in the United States, that kind of behavior of Christians. So you can be critical about specific Christian behavior, specific points of view about gay marriage, for example. You can be critical about that, negative about that. But historically, if you look at the influence of the gospel, especially on Europe, and jumping from Europe to the United States as well. So the influence of the gospel of Jesus Christ on Western culture, it is it is an enormous difference. If you now look at China, if you now look at the Soviet Union, and now the newest Tsar, Putin, if you look at North Korea, everywhere in Muslim countries, a lot of Muslim countries, you see a power-driven type of politics. And Fukuyama is calling what he is seeing in Europe and America, there is the exception. There is the exception. And why is the exception there? Only one explanation, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So the prophetic influence that is already based on the Old Testament. So the Jewish influence, emphasizing the rights of the weak against power, against empire. That is, I would say, the influence of historically of the Jewish and the Christian history, the early history of the Israelites and the early Christians, and their influence on finally Europe and the United States. And people that have a negative distortion of that history are simply not knowing the facts. If we keep on talking about the Dark Ages, talking about medieval times, then you don't see the positive contribution from the monasteries on science, on healthcare, on care for the poor, care for travelers. Hospitals in Europe always had Christian names. So that's.
I guess we all would agree on that historical contribution. Of course, then the question is how well people are aware of that, and second, like how to apply what is good in today's political landscape, and that's actually quite much more difficult challenge, perhaps, or something we could move on to. And I will actually continue with another quote from your book. Let's see how we can make this work. Okay. Some Christians consciously choose for a non-Christian political party, either on the liberal or the social democratic end of the political spectrum. That's totally true. Also here, others, such as somebody called Meindert Lerling, are a member of a Christian political party, but think things can be a bit sharper, aimed more at bearing witness. Let the center of power hear an uncut prophetic sound instead of applying some minor managerial corrections while accepting all sorts of political compromises. That sounds very familiar. We might have some politicians such as this Meindert Lerling also in other nations, and this might ring the bell with many of us. So how would you comment this from your perspective? Where do you stand? How do you see things? Yeah. Are these total opposites, or is there any kind of ground for middle ground? Maybe Johannes also, you might have a comment on this.
Yeah, you want to start, Johannes?
Yeah, also because my time is somewhat constrained, as you may remember. So that is why I kind of do this just for everybody here. I have to leave at 5 o'clock, so that is why but we pre-discussed this for everybody who's listening. So which I am taking the liberty to take the floor now. Before this because now we're basically coming with this question, we're also coming to this basically core question, and I would like to address that quickly. Obviously, there are always Christians who join non-Christian parties, and this will be the case like always, and it's not problematic as such. I think I would not overemphasize it. The point is the value of Christian or Christian Democratic parties themselves. I think that's more relevant. When I pre-discussed this with Tapio, I mentioned two very, for me at least, very important reasons, and both of them, if you look around in Europe and globally, I think are very relevant. So I really take this from a global perspective. I really also think on the US and Latin America, Africa, because if we can only look to this from a European perspective, it's good, but it's kind of limited. And Rob already referred to this, international interest in Kuiper, Abraham Kuiper. So I would kind of click into that in that sense. That first of all, what do Christian Democrat parties offer? First of all, they offer a model for Christians to engage based on their own Christian values in a way that is balanced, constructive, and productive. I already mentioned the creation of the European Union. I would say that was quite a productive feat. And where that model of engagement is lacking, where that's kind of translative model of Christian faith to politics is lacking, Christians tend to veer in all the wrong directions that betray their own faith one way or the other. So in the US, and in Brazil, for example, you see this veering to the right or far right even of Christian nationalism, simply also because when I engage with Christians from these spheres, they simply don't know any other model. So we kind of are blessed to have these Christian parties here in Europe that are part of the thinking and the political consideration and really have a kind of balanced, constructive, productive approach. So this is one. Because it's also possible that Christians veer too much in the other direction, which is a very left, liberal, individualistic and way, and then also lose basically their witness, but then in a way that basically major media find nice, yeah, but still they lose their values and basically disappear within the mainstream, well, whatever is there in mainstream society. And that is also a loss, because the question is then, what is uniquely Christian? And Rob already kind of addressed that, saying, oh, it's not like only the individual or the government, there is something else. And I would think that we need to kind of redefine that what is uniquely Christian. And when it comes to Sallux, we basically said, look, we cannot stay in this sphere of the past of Catholicism and Protestantism and so on. If you look at European level, you need to have a Christian approach that is pan-European and truly Christian, but also kind of appealing to society and the questions that are now. And I would also say that give a perspective for this new generation that is post-materialistic and value that in a positive sense. I think it's a positive thing that newer generations are more post-materialistic than basically, baby boomers. And so from there, we basically said, look, if you kind of look to this from a more, bird's eye perspective, then you come to 2 points, and we basically made this one point, and this is a relational understanding of human dignity. So you have relational thinking as an application of what is the essence of human dignity. So human dignity is actually something that can appeal to everybody, right? And that is uniquely Christian in many ways. And if you have a relational understanding and application of human dignity, then basically you have you have something to offer that is clearly unique, because it's not this liberal individualism or socialist leftist individualism that is now kind of, veering to wokeness and all that. And I'm always saying woke is not necessary if you have human dignity as starting point, because you don't need to work towards human dignity. Human dignity is there as a given. And if you have that clear, then the relational application of it is actually very fit to this post-materialistic generation, and more appealing to them as well. Because I think a lot of people are trying to find that balance. What you see in the Netherlands is basically the complete fracturing of the political landscape in sub-interests. Yeah. And basically at the same time, people see that as a problem, but they just don't see a new unifying principle. Mm-hmm. But I think Christian and Christian Democrat parties are uniquely placed to say human dignity, that is what we have all. And the relational understanding of it and application of it is something that can shape society in a very productive, constructive way. And then you move beyond this either left or leftist individualism or this kind of new nationalism that is also kind of, not very applicable and actually in the global society as well. So in that regard, I would say, yes, there is absolutely a model for Christians there in that approach that is uniquely Christian and very much something that is basically coming from these traditions of Christian engagement with politics. And at the same time appealing and having a future message, so to say, appealing for next generation, future generation. This is something that we see with ECPUs. What I see is that there's these young people that are part of the ECPU's activities, and that's with the youth wing of the ECPM. They really pick up that relational message as like, okay, this is something that we really like. And this is something that really appeals to us and is really something that we can see as something that is applying to economy, that's applying to climate change issues and even geopolitics and so on. I think that if Christian Democrats don't want to prevent that, they simply are repeating the old stuff, and then this is the direction to go. And then you have a message that is uniquely you and uniquely appealing to, in principle, if you do it right, to a very broad audience. The problem is that a lot of Christians involved in politics at the moment, they are kind of locked in these old trenches. And we need to get out of that. And not kind of like, oh, now we embrace the liberal status quo, the left liberal status quo, or we embrace the nationalistic status quo. None of that. We can get out of these trenches with our own message of common human dignity that is really beyond these lines, and also very much in line with the fact that we do have a global society, but it doesn't mean that we have a borderless society. So, I mean, the implication of human dignity is not that you basically adopt the left liberal agenda. It's very individualistic, and that only indeed sees, government enforcing that, ideas or something like that. It's really moving beyond that. And so when it comes very quickly to the last question you asked here, is elections coming soon in Finland? Because I have to close, and I'm simply want to come back to the last question that I got from you. What is the key message before the next elections? Well, I would say don't repeat simply the status quo, but really try to find a new engagement with regard to economy, with regard to climate change, with regard to all these issues based on this relational understanding of human dignity. And I think that when you see to some of our recent publications, how we translate that in various fields, climate change, economy, I think there's a lot there that can be translated in actually very concrete policy proposals. But first of all, you need to get out of this old mindset and to basically move to a mindset that says, we have as Christians a very unique, clear message for the future of Europe that gives common hope, common ground for our society, and that to communicate that. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there that we simply not using at the moment. And I think we should go there. And this is at least where Sallux is going. This is also when you see the new core principles of the ECPM, not new principles, but basically how they renewed emphasis on them. You see the same message there. And I think that for Christian Democrat parties in all of Europe, the big challenge is that either to stick with the vested interests where the big money is, where the donors are, and so on, but when the electorate is leaving, or you go basically move to a message that is really very much you as Christian Democrats, as Christians, but really appealing for the future.
Okay.
So that was my contribution, and I have to go very soon for all kinds of practical reasons related to my family and our kid. So I thank you, Tapio. Thank you, Rob, and also Matthew. I haven't heard of Matthew yet, but I'm pretty certain he can add a very good contribution. And simply want to point people to our website of Sallux. You simply Google it and you find our bookstore. There's a lot of new publications there, and you can go from there.
Okay.
Thank you, Johannes, for these thoughts. And maybe, Rob, I think I see your hand. Maybe you want to comment on this. The challenges are, of course, quite similar in many countries, and I totally agree. We have some work to do with writing all those thoughts into 21st century language. And also, I would like to, in this context, maybe perhaps if Matthew is already there online, like if he would like to say something on this, but like, please, Rob, let's.
Just very quickly. Yes. Matthew is writing a new project for as a follow-up on our previous publication on Christian democracy. So Matt is perfectly placed to take the baton from me and to pick it up from there. So I hope you have a very good continuation of your meeting. I wish you all well. Thank you.
Yes, please. Would you like to continue, Rob, or if Matthew is then has something? Just please.
Yeah, I thought Matthew was trying to continue.
No, I was just indicating that I'm still here, but I think you had a point, Rob. So please, you go ahead first, and then I can come in afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I agree with Johannes when he is emphasizing the uniqueness of the Christian Democrat contribution. And when you are using concepts, for example, human dignity or this relational way of thinking to make clear what is unique, what is this contribution from a Christian Democrat perspective is, that is fine for me. The human dignity for Christians and for Jews is immediately founded on the first page of Genesis, being created in the image of God, for example. So it's completely clear that here is a unique historical tradition, and that's the tradition that we want to give words to in politics too. And the relational way of thinking, is close to what I refer to as that web of society. There are different types of relationships between human beings, among human beings. And it's good to be aware of those different types of relationships, those different kinds of associations within society. So that's this unique contribution. But when I go back to the quote, it started with Christians that are wanting to give their political contribution by joining, for example, a liberal political party or a more social democrat political party. Well, I don't want to fight those Christians. If you, as a Christian, in your conscience, in your thinking, if you are thinking that you can have your political contribution at those sides of the political spectrum, it's okay for me. But for myself, I want to defend the unique contribution of Christians joining in one or maybe, as in the Netherlands, several Christian political parties that have their more or less explicitly Christian contribution in politics. So the second half of the quote is about a Christian in the Netherlands, minded leerling, that wants to stress this unique contribution by Christians as well. But to my feeling, he is limiting this contribution too much towards the, let's say, the witness, the being a witness for, yeah, for what? For Jesus Christ. Okay. But what about the specific, practical, political issues at stake? Are you content by just making clear that for Christians, all immigrants should be welcome? There is a problem. If there are too much immigrants, then there is a problem. So what I want to say with this quote is that when you are really trying to engage in politics, when you want to engage as Christians in politics, then things become more complicated. And then you need much more background thinking. Then you have you can support each other as Christians within a political party to do this thinking together. And then you have to figure out how to arrive at political positions that are making impact. So you have to try to have a kind of nuance. You have to accept that politics will involve compromises. And of course, if you forget your Christian background value system, then you arrive at a type of politics, well, you can call that lost salt or just managerial, formal, procedural, minor impacts. Okay, then you have lost your intention of wanting to contribute as Christians to politics. But I think it is still possible to make clear in politics that Christianity has not just a past that has stamped the history of Europe and the United States, especially, and from that worldwide, I would say. It's not just a matter of the past, but it is still relevant. So the value system of Christians is not a matter of the past only, but is still relevant.
Yes, that's actually quite actually something. Even the book you refer to the current Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, about how he's kind of a visionless, somebody who doesn't have a vision. He's very pragmatic, and if you only have a vision for a certain few issues like abortion or something, then it kind of leads that you are just very pragmatic on the other 99 issues, and that leads you to becoming sort of similar kind of pragmatic politicians. And sometimes I feel this is just my intention that Christian Democratic Party, sometimes what it means to lose your soul is kind of being just very pragmatic and not even like discussing on how do we vote on this issue on tax policy based on our values. Of course, there's the extreme of trying to find all the answers from the Bible directly, and that doesn't work. But this kind of pragmatism maybe isn't the way to go if you want to have some vision. And then in the long run, I guess it's makes a big question. Oh, it's too bad. Per was here and he has to leave, but there is he has written a PhD on the secularization in Sweden, and the link is there in the discussion section.
Okay.
Too bad that he couldn't. It'd be great to hear from him too. Yes, from Sweden. But in this line, maybe we would like to give the floor to Matthew. Maybe you had a comment on this question we were just discussing. So please join.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tapio. Could you remind me of the exact question, because we've covered a number of things. I had some comments on what Rob had been saying more generally, but could you maybe remind me of the specific question so I could start there?
Yeah, just a second. Just 1 second. Okay, we were discussing on this quote on how people choose different parties from different reasons, but the question that Johannes actually was mentioning, talking about, was actually on exactly on this ideological contribution that I know you have been doing a lot of work on relational thinking and many other topics that are very much related. So maybe the question would be like, where to find kind of new, let's say, ideological foundation for Christian democratic parties. Where do you see that, you know, there would be need to kind of work on the ideological content? What questions are there that are, you know, in the air in the society right now, that where maybe perhaps Christian philosophy or relational thinking or whatever there is in tradition or history or that would have something to give to today's society? So maybe that's kind of the question. I know can maybe mention some of the work you have been doing or that you're doing right now with Sallux, or so. I don't know, maybe there is something from there.
Thanks, Tapio. Okay, yeah, thanks very much, and thanks, Rob, for the contribution you've been making. I did use some of your own work as I was doing research on this topic, so that it was helpful. I think it's really important to make a differentiation between our basis, our ideological basis on the one hand, and our mode of engagement on the other. Because I think we shouldn't be ashamed to say that as Christians we have a basis in Scripture. Mm-hmm. I think it's actually very difficult to sustain a coherent notion of human dignity without the image of God, and there are even secular thinkers who use something like this idea of the image of God or something sacred about the person to maintain a basis for human dignity. So I don't think we should be ashamed to say we have a scriptural basis, but that's different from our mode of engagement. I think it is a problem when we try to engage politically purely on the basis that something is from scripture, or when we try to bring verses directly into the political arena as ways of arguing things, whether it's proof texts or otherwise. And I think it's really important that we actually keep these two things separately, but we're faithful in both of these areas. In other words, I think we have to keep going back to scripture for the wisdom and the power that's there, but we have to keep looking outwards towards the ways of engaging in the world which are helpful and constructive and unifying, to see how these two things relate to each other. And it's difficult to keep these two disciplines separate, but I think we really have to. And I think one of the things that's good about relational thinking, and I'm inheriting a long tradition of relational thinking in the work I've done. The Jubilee Centre is as old as I am. It's about 40 years old, and has been going on much longer than I have in this. But what I found is that relational thinking is one very good way to maintain a strong scriptural basis with a mode of engagement that appeals much more broadly than the Christian constituency. And in some ways, what it does is very simple. It says, okay, the human person is relational in the way that Rob described. We're inescapably born through a family. Of course, there are many different ways this happens for people, but a family is part of one's identity from the beginning. Not only that, but we have a relationship to the environment, the world around us. We are all absolutely dependent on the environment for air and water and food. And as well as that, we're all born into a people, whether we're mixed, whether we're born into a stateless nation, as some people are. The majority of people are born into citizenship of one country or another. And so our identity is already relational from the beginning. And what scripture does, what the Bible does, is it actually gives us a way in which this can be worked out in society. Through a combination of Old and New Testaments, through a combination of what God directed for the people of Israel, and then how that is altered and changed and renewed in Christ. We have a way of actually being relational that I think is a very attractive vision, not only for Christians, but if we think about Christian relational principles that we have in terms of strong families, strong households, which include people other than just the family. It's a very important point. Strong local communities and self-sufficient local communities, in a sense of moving against decentralization, and of course a strong nation, but an inclusive nation, which doesn't close its doors to people from the outside in need. That combination of things is very difficult to maintain outside of biblical understanding. It can seem contradictory to people, but in fact, it all does fit together. And I think you can work very hard to see what is it actually that the Bible is giving us on the one hand, and then how can we communicate this in a way which fits with people's values who aren't starting off with the Bible. So I think that's how relational thinking works. That's how it needs to be developed, and it is still something which is being developed. And what it means is that relational thinking can be espoused by a number of different political parties, and not just one. It can even be espoused by non-Christian political parties, insofar as that vision of society is attractive to them. Even if they don't themselves subscribe to the authority of Scripture or of Christ. Now, this is the problem, and I'd love to hear what Rob has to say about this. This might leave us in a situation where we say, okay, well, in that case, the role of Christians in politics is really just about individual choice. You choose which party to join, or you choose which party to form. But as a body, churches or church denominations really don't have anything to say. All they can tell their members is, okay, you guys go and make your choice. And my question would be, is that really what we're saying? Is that the role of churches, just to tell their members to make choices? Or do churches and church denominations as bodies, as collectives, have distinctive political roles? Do other civil society organizations, as well as churches, sports clubs you mentioned, do they have political roles? So should we basically be maybe widening our discussion beyond political parties to political actors more broadly than just political parties on the one hand and individuals on the other? That's part of the question I have, and it's a question that comes from biblical reflection. I won't go into that, but that's where it comes from. Thank you.
Yeah. May I continue?
Yes, please go on. That's a very good question.
Yeah, I'm glad with this broadening of what we are talking about, not only about Christian parties, but about other political actors as well. And the question is a church a political actor, and what can a church, what can I as a pastor say to the individuals sitting before me during a Christian service? So, well, first of all, when I return to that analysis by Aaron Ren, signaling the negative views about the Christian tradition, then I first started that it is historically not true, this negative view. But I wanted to make a second remark then, and that is what Aaron Ren was saying, that we should not outsource our political thinking. That was a remark by Ren that I completely agreed with. So I don't want to fight against Christians that join non-Christian parties, secular parties, whatever you call them. If they can have their influence there, it's fine for me. But I nevertheless come from a background, and that's more a personal background, and I think I have to explain this to make clear how my thinking has proceeded. I come from personally from a background that the church that I grew up in, a specific Calvinist Reformed church, has started a political party directly related to this church. So the membership of the church was a condition to be allowed as a member of this political party. And this is one of the parties that together now are forming the ChristenUnie, the Christian Union. So when the Christian Union was started, that original church-related party had to give up that direct relationship to that church. And from the moment that I became aware of politics and so on, so let's say from 40 years old or something like that, I already protested against that direct link of that church membership for that political party. So I am aware of the function of a Christian Democrat party, whatever Christian party, as a kind of intermediate social structure between Christians in their different churches and politics with their different issues. And certainly one condition for a political party is that it should not only advocate the issues that are relevant for the Christian voters, like abortion, euthanasia, and so on, pro-life, that kind of things. The pragmatic, what you call the pragmatic approach. Oh, there is someone. Okay, sorry for the disturbance. But the a condition for a political party is that it should be aware of the national and even the international political issues at stake, and be active for let's say the furtherance of justice, if that's an English expression, to promote justice on a national and international level. Okay, now I'm going back to your question, what is the role of the church? Generally, I will not use any part of my sermon to advocate a specific political party towards the congregation. Nevertheless, again, in the history of that Reformed church I belong to, just before the Second World War, there has been a synod that explicitly warned against membership of one of the political parties in the Netherlands then that was positive about Nazi Germany. So it was a very right-wing nationalist party. And there was a church synod, and one of the decisions was membership of that political party cannot be combined with being a member of our church. So that was certainly a political, I even would say a prophetic voice of the church at that time. And that's what I agree with still. In specific circumstances, the church can have a prophetic voice with political consequences. And to move that layer deeper, probably, I would say that the church as church, being church, is in itself already a political actor. It is already a political actor because it is one of the associations within society. And it is a specific association that it cannot be compared to a sporting club. It is an association consisting of members from all different social strata and from all different types of people, all different types of intelligence, and they join together in the church, and they show in the way how they relate to each other, how it is to be a society, how it is to be sensitive to justice, how to be sensitive to what is needed by the weak, how to be thoroughly, yes, my English is not good enough, I'm afraid, but in a thorough way, relational. That is shown in being church. And that is in itself a political message towards society. But then to return to where I started, the church itself is not an active political actor in formal politics. So I'm not joining as a member of the church in parliament. I know in England, bishops are part of the Senate, of the, So that's a different situation, and maybe that can be defended by for historical reasons. But I would say I consider the political party as an intermediate political actor, not especially on behalf of one specific church, but yes, a political party can be an actor in the name of a series of Christians, at least, to bring in their views on what is good politics and what is good for society as a whole. Okay, I think that's my position at the moment.
Thank you. That's quite deep. That goes quite deep, actually.
Okay.
What I take home from these latest contributions, I would actually say that I feel like there is lots of like work to be done in Christian democratic parties. Actually, of course, I can only talk on behalf of the Finnish party, but like putting all these thoughts that you and Matthew and Johannes shared like into some kind of policy platform. I think that we would, if we would take seriously what you have been saying, and Matthew and Johannes, that means actually we have a lot of work to do to put these kind of rewriting our platforms. And of course, that's something that has to be done every now and then. When you know, situations change and there is more and more, hopefully more revelation of the human condition of the society, and we would say from God's word in that regards. We are running out of time very soon. I would like to still ask one question if you have time. That's a little bit more like the tactical question, and a topic moving a little bit on to this kind of political landscape that we are seeing today. Because the politics, the way we are doing politics itself is changing, and it's becoming more kind of short-living, kind of ad hoc political campaigns for something or against something. And in Finland, we just a few years ago we started this kind of people can make their own suggestions, and you know, if you get 50,000 signatories, then it becomes kind of something that the parliament has to take into note. And the membership of all parties are diminishing. So we are seeing kind of the parties are a little bit kind of dying out, not exactly, but you know, somehow they are struggling. So that's one thing like where we are living in, and I don't know if I would see that, you know, it's hard to imagine a situation where like political parties would become kind of again popular way of, you know, participating. So there is kind of has to be something else, and that's also it's not just the policy platforms that we would need to rewrite. We would also need to find again like what would be the way of kind of engaging in society, engaging in political decision making, and being in some kind of community. Like the parties are a community. They are kind of a group of people who are like playing in the sports team. I would somehow say parties and sports teams are quite similar in some regards. The game is just a little bit complicated. The rules are a little bit different between football and party politics, but actually it's very similar in many regards. But like that's kind of a landscape. I don't know if you have any comments on that. And of course, then there is the other issue, like being kind of a center party, and you know, talking of things like, you know, structure of society, relations and associations. You know, that's kind of a very quiet message. And now we are in the time of loud voices of very populist movements and political polarization, and you know, some are woke and anti-woke or whatever culture wars they are. So are the Christian democratic voices or parties kind of too mild to be relevant in this our age? So is there kind of, we have to wait for a time when when this kind of quiet voices about family or relations and associations are needed? So I mean, is it so that, you know, the time is not even ripe yet for another revival of kind of Christian democratic type of political movements or ideas? So this is kind of how I see the age is. It's not even the time yet, exactly yet. Maybe that we will live through a time of more noise and polarization and conflict for some time before people are again interested in kind of a Christian democratic type of thing. And so sorry for a long question, but maybe if there is any thoughts on these kind of more tactical questions. And of course, if anybody else would like to comment, or Matthew or somebody, so please.
Well, the first thing I would like to react to say is that the mildness that you ended with, mildness is a Christian virtue and is very relevant at the moment. Exactly in a time of polarization, this mildness is part of the political message. Exactly
Well,
that.
that would make a political, you know, slogan.
Yeah,
The
be
mild
mild.
alternative.
Yeah, be mild. Don't be Putin. Yeah. So that's one. And although I am a pastor at the moment, I'm not very good at being a prophet until now, I'm afraid. But what I see in the Netherlands is that the membership numbers were diminishing in labor unions until this year. And now they are rising again. And of course, I don't know, will this be the trend for the next 10 years? Again, I'm not a prophet. But the interesting thing is that sometimes some things should happen before people start to realize, aha, that's the reason that labor unions existed. And now I understand. And now I feel suddenly threatened as an individual without support. And now I understand that in a labor union, I have this support that I am looking for. Well, something similar is, I think, can become true for political parties. Although in the Netherlands, again, most political parties, the membership rates are diminishing in the Netherlands too. But there are 1 of 2 or 3 parties that remain quite stable or are even rising, especially new political parties attract members usually. And in my booklet, Political Wisdom, I have emphasized in any case the need for Christian political parties to network among other Christian organizations. For example, in the Netherlands, we have the Salvation Army. I guess it's in Finland as well, Salvation Army. From Mr. Booth, yeah. And although a lot of people have negative views about institutional churches, most people have a positive view of the work done by the Salvation Army. For example, care for addictions, people addicted to drugs and so on. Yeah. So by building relationships between the Christian Democrat Party and these types of organizations, this makes visible for society, for all members of society, that the Christian politics that you stand for is not just a matter of, well, some specific Christian issues, but that is relevant for the whole of society. So they want to have an imagination of what are the good things that you stand for. It's not just a matter of principles, let alone of quotes from the Bible, although we should not be ashamed about them, because these are the roots of our Western civilization, I would say. You can quote Mandela, or you can quote Reverend Martin Luther King. Why not quote Isaiah? Or why not quote Jesus himself, if the quote is relevant?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's good to make clear in pictures what you are standing for. And then you need probably what other organizations, Christian organizations, are doing practically in society. Okay, that's first reaction.
That's quite, yes, those are good words and very good challenges, and finish up with. So I don't know how to sum up this discussion. There is so many things and so many challenges we faced, but I kind of hear all of you saying that it's not time. It's there is still a need for Christian democratic parties. Question that sometimes comes up, whether the name should be something different, that they should be called something else, like European People's Party in the European Parliament or something else. In most nations, they are called something like Christian Democrats, but not in every country. Like the United States, the party closest, the Christian Democrats is something else. I don't remember the name right now, but that's also something like there's many kind of tactical issues, and that's also something we sometimes comes up, like, you know, should we brand ourselves differently? But anyways, that's a maybe topic for another discussion. Unless you want to say some final words, but I really want to thank you, Rob, for this contribution. We will make this available online, hopefully, if everything works. Not always so sure with technology, but I really want to thank you, and also Johannes and Matthew, for participating in this. Yep. We have had participants from at least four countries joining this discussion, and then we will make it online available for further use. And if you haven't read this book yet, so I can highly recommend it. It's asks very relevant questions, and we didn't even go through even half of them. There is also questions from the perspective of the church, like how do you see the parties from church perspective, and other many relevant questions. And so I would be glad to have another event like this. So thank you, Rob, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, and then thanks to all the participants. I really want to thank you. If you want to say informally something, please feel free to, but like we can maybe officially call this a meeting. So thank you, everybody.